Now, if you collect any Sonic merch, I'm sure you're all aware of how expensive things have gotten nowadays. Despite the fact that most pieces of Sonic merch are technically intended for children, you really don't think that when you go on eBay. Because in the year of 2023, there's an overabundance of Sonic figures, plushes, and pretty much everything in between, which has absolutely skyrocketed in the aftermarket value. And when I say skyrocketed, I really do mean skyrocketed. If you've been in this franchise as long as me, you've witnessed firsthand things doubling, tripling, and even more than that. It's to the point now where people pay literal thousands of dollars for Sonic plushes. And given the current state of the world and how expensive things are, it's understandable why this happened. But I mean, I don't have to like it, so insert political joke here. But anyway, I thought it'd be interesting to catalog some of these prices and go through the biggest Sonic price jumps in recent memory. I'm going to be going mainly off of my own personal experience, as well as things other people have told me about. Or maybe videos from years ago which cataloged how much they were worth back then, and comparing them to now. And I just want to say one thing real quick, I'm not really going to be counting the more expensive stuff that's already expensive. Like, what I mean is stuff like Soap Sonic, for example, because for one, it's just pretty obvious and there's not really much I could say about it that hasn't been said already. And the same thing goes for a lot of the other adventure plushes. Like, there's not really much I can say about an adventure plush going from $600 to $800 in value, compared to stuff like a $10 action figure becoming a gold mine. So I'm gonna not count most of those for this video, for the purpose of entertainment, I guess. That's a good excuse. It'll make more sense as we go along. Oh yeah, and huge thanks to everyone on the Discord server for giving me some of the ideas for this video, which you should go join immediately. So I guess let's just hop right in. So let's start out with a more recent company, being Tomy. Now, as we all know, Tomy's figures and plushes weren't really revered. I mean, sure, they got the job done, and what they made was alright, but comparing it to Jazzwares at the time, it was really just a step backwards. So their stuff hasn't really gone up too much, but some things have gone up a decent amount. And when I say some things, I mean plushes, because I want to make it very clear now, the only way a price jump is going to happen with Sonic figures nowadays is if the figure is super unique or desired. And thanks to our bestest friends over at Jack Specific, that's no longer the case for these guys. I mean, think about it, the Tomy Sonic figure from their collector line pretty much has no use on this planet anymore. He was okay for the time, but nowadays we have an infinitely better Sonic from Jack's that's more articulated, more accurate, and cheaper. So honestly, why would anyone ever go out of their way to get this thing in 2023? And that's the same mentality for a lot of Tomy and Jazzwares stuff. And really any standard Sonic figure. Yes, we're to the point where I'm officially calling Jazzwares useless. How the turns have tabled. The point is, after Jax's dominance in the field, all other standard figures have really no demand for them anymore, at least compared to what they used to have, leading to heavy losses to their aftermarket value. So that's why here I'm pretty much talking about Tomy's plushes and not really anything else. As for them, they've gone up a decent amount, some more than others, like especially Amy and Silver. I'd assume since Jax hasn't gotten to them yet, though to be fair, I don't really think Jax holds much weight on this one, since, you know. But they've gone up a decent amount. I remember a couple years ago them being about 30 bucks each, and now most of their plushes go for around 40 to 60. Nothing too crazy, but a nice increase for the books. After those though, let's hop into a more odd one, being the Sonic Tech Decks. In case you forgot, a couple years ago they started making tech decks with Sonic on them with the company Finesse, and as of recently, I don't think they're making them anymore. At least for now, considering that there's been like no new ones in the last year or two. They're of course still doing their normal skateboard decks, so they definitely haven't lost the license or anything, but they've just stopped making the tech decks for some reason. So these ones have gone up a decent amount. Some of the more generic ones are still pretty cheap, but a few of the older and rarer ones have gone up to 30 to 40 bucks, and some of them even more. However, none of them hold a candle, however, to the limited edition Mephiles one, which I've seen go for over $60. Like, my god, it's a tech deck. I know tech decks have a pretty big fan base, and this one does have a pretty crazy character on it. Didn't the whole trend die out in like 2019? Isn't it that middle schoolers are obsessed with skateboarding and tech decks, and then they go to high school and then they get a car and completely lose all interest in them? I mean, I'm no tech deck man, but I thought the whole thing was over. After those, however, let's get into some Jazzwares stuff. Like I said, most of their main line isn't too pricey compared to what it used to be. Their figures aren't completely worthless or anything, obviously, but I used to see them go for much more. However, it seems like you can find most of these things for around 35 to 50 bucks each, with a few others being rather expensive only because they're so fragile. But of course, a lot of these have lost their luster. Obviously, since Jax made all their characters again.
You're weak. I'm you.
But there's still at least one set that yields a high profit, being the 5-inch Black Nightwave. Like I said, these guys have super unique designs that we're probably not going to get anytime soon, so for now they're your only options. But I must say, they are pretty damn good. They've got pretty much everything you'd want from a Jax release and more. so that's why they're still going to remain being pretty expensive. As for Sonic, I've seen him go for well over $150 complete, and in-box even up to like $500, and then it only goes up with Shadow, who I've seen go for a tad lower when he's incomplete, so I could totally see him going for more than Sonic. However, of course, neither of them can stand up against the mythical Sir Galahad, which, as we all know, was pretty much not even released. It just had that little bit smidge of release. Just a little bit. I found this listing on Mercari of one that sold in September of 2023 for $250 loose. That's just absolutely crazy. I wouldn't even know what he'd be in the box. I will say though, there are a few figures from the main line that are still profitable, at least compared to what they used to be. Like for example, the Free Riders figures of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, which get a higher value in that order, but mainly Knuckles and Tails, which Tails goes for like 85 to 100 from what I've seen, and Knuckles is more rare than anything. I very rarely see this guy up for sale, and when I do, I've seen him go for over 120 to 140 if I'm remembering correctly. And finally, they're Metal Sonic, which as you could assume, it's clearly because he has awesome metallic paint on him. I've seen this guy go for like $100 recently, and it makes sense because he is a pretty base looking figure. And the same thing with the 12-inch figure, that one's pretty expensive too. It's funny though, because as this video is coming out, we're getting all new stock of the Jax Gold one that barely released, exclusively at Burlington stores. So once again, Jax is tearing something out of the corpse that is Jazzwares. Okay, so now let's get on to one that absolutely blew my mind. So when I asked my Discord server for ideas, I was alerted to the fact that for some godforsaken, unknown reason bound to the universe, somehow, Jax Pacific Wave 4 Knuckles with a blue Chaos Emerald and the Super Shadow figure with the red Chaos Emerald are going for upwards of $130 new in box on eBay. When I first learned about this, I genuinely thought I wasn't seeing correctly. Because how, in God's name, did this happen? It makes no sense. Out of all the characters that this could happen to, not freaking Mecha Sonic, not Omega, not Infinite, it happens to a re-release of a now outdated Knuckles figure and fucking Piss Shadow. I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt and say that the reason is because these two figures came with Chaos Emeralds. And of course, people are gonna need those to complete their sets of Chaos Emeralds, which nowadays is possible since they released the final one. But this is not how you do it, Chief. How the hell do you willingly spend $130 on a re-release of a generic-ass Sonic figure? I get that the completionist mindset is real, I really do. But Jesus Christ, here is the thing though. There are other re-releases of how to get both the emeralds. You can go on Amazon right now and get Ray for $15 with the red one. And they're making a new 2-pack with this exact same Knuckles, the blue one, and Shadow. Get both of those and you'll save $200 on 2 rocks. What, why, when, ah! So after those, let's get on to one I'm surprised I haven't mentioned by now. Being, of course, Joyride Sonic and Joyride Shadow. These two are prime examples of what this whole video is about, where demand for a figure can just soar so high, and the price can just absolutely balloon overnight. And that is exactly what happened with these two. You could usually find them both for about 50 to 60, maybe 70 at most each, a couple years ago. And that was loose, usually with the cards and bases and such, you're gonna pay no more than maybe 100. But my god, what a Pat Mac video does to a piece of Sonic merch's price on eBay. With every view that video got, it just made people want these things more and more. Especially because of those sweet, succulent, and delectable shoes on Sonic. And because of that, if you want Sonic loose, I've seen people pay up to $200 for him, not accounting for any of his accessories. With them, you're getting into ludicrous territory. I was lucky to find one a couple years ago for only $120. That came with everything, and I am eternally grateful. However, the same does not go for Shadow, who I've wanted for years now, but I just can't do it. Because he goes for even more than Sonic, which I guess makes sense because this was the first ever figure of Shadow. But I've seen Shadow with his rare red base and not the card go for over $300. These two are just absolute insanity. I mean, I understand why these two are some of the coolest looking Sonic figures ever made. They represent a fan favorite game and look really cool on a shelf with other figures. But come on, this is getting ridiculous. One weird thing though is that it seems like the prototype Sonic hasn't really gone up in value along with these two. He sort of just stayed at his soft price of around $400 mint in box. Mainly since I assume the demand for him is way less, which makes sense, he's just a grayed out version of Sonic. He is a collector's item, but if you're gonna spend this much on a Joyride figure, you're just gonna want Sonic or Shadow. I don't really think anyone's clamoring to get this guy anytime soon. It's just kind of you're cool if you have it. But anyway, I think this brings us to what's quite possibly the most insane price hike for any Sonic product I've ever seen. And what would it be other than the Sine Sonic plushes? Ooh-wee. So if you've seen the Pat Mac video on these guys, you'll know that the prices used to be relatively high, or so we thought, because we had no idea what was possible. Because all of these plushes are absolute insanity now. Let's start with the 2007 set. These guys aren't as abundant as the 2012 set online, so it's a bit harder to get prices for every single one of them. But from what I've seen, they go for multiple hundreds of dollars each, usually around the $200 to $300 mark, which considering how small these plushes are, and how honestly I don't really think these guys have aged flawlessly, is pretty freaking insane. And weirdly, it seems like the small Sonic is more expensive than the big one for some reason. I don't get it. But then, we arrive at the 2012 Sine Sonic the Hedgehog plush set. This set is quite possibly one of the craziest ones I have ever seen in all of my days. Considering that on their own, I have seen plushes of this set sell for upwards of $400. Just the day before I'm writing this, an Amy sold on eBay for $400, and the day before that, a Shadow sold for the same price. But for some reason, the demand on this set is just so unbelievably massive. I mean, I get the set looks nice, but there are so many other Sonic plushes you can get. Why don't you spend that money on an adventure plush or something? Why is this one in particular so sought after? And yes, I know they were given a more limited release compared to something like GE or Tomy, but not as much to make them $400 a piece. It's to the point where there are listings on eBay for the full set which have an asking price of almost $3,000, and people bought them. And hot take, this set isn't even that good. Amy looks peak, she's awesome. Knuckles looks like a Looney Tune. Sonic looks fine. Tails looks... and Shadow's face looks like a toilet seat.
Whatever happened to owning like a dog? Like a real living thing that you can feed?
And you all wonder why I collect Marvel stuff now. But I believe that marks the end of today's adventure. This really was an interesting video to go into, and reminisce of the times before the Sonic economy completely imploded. But yeah, with that said, I hope you all enjoyed. Tell me your guys' favorite memories of wasting money on blue plush rats, and I hope to see you all soon. After a while, Crocodile.